Well, follow this now. And if by favor, it is no longer of works, otherwise favor is no longer favor. And if it is works, it is no longer favor, otherwise work is no longer work. And that is absolutely clear to everyone. I don't think Paul ever said anything more convoluted. But actually, it's very simple. What is the issue Paul's talking about in verse 6? He's talking about how Yahweh selected who he selected, not about what the people he selected did. He's saying they did nothing to earn being picked. He didn't say they did nothing after being picked. As a matter of fact, everything in Romans is about, as a matter of fact, the beginning of what we just read today is about that they dropped the ball after being picked because they were trying to find their own righteousness instead of subjecting themselves to his. This whole section in here, we're going to see the same thing in Ephesians 2, is about that they did nothing to earn prior to being picked. He called them out of Egypt when they were slaves. In Ephesians, it says he called you when you were in your sin. In other words, you did nothing to earn his choice. He chooses by divine favor who he chooses. Remember, he says, I will have compassion on whom I'll have compassion. I'll give favor to whom I'll have favor. Recognize that verse 6, this is important because I've tried to explain this many other ways and it never really worked very well because I didn't get it. Okay, I'm admitting in front of you, I didn't get it. Why? Because I was looking at it without the full context of what he's talking about. He's talking about how the selection of the people that are going to do the provoking was done. How the selection of the remnant was done. It was done by divine choice, not by works prior to the selection. Can we see that now? Doesn't that change everything about verse 6? Okay, so now look at verse 6. It says, if by favor, my selecting who I selected, then it's no longer of works or effort or toil. So it's not of like, I deserve this, I earned this. Otherwise, the divine favor is no longer favor. And if it's of a works, it's no longer favor. Otherwise, the work is no longer work. He says, what then? He says, look, he has made this case. I don't remember what chapter earlier it talks about. Okay, here it is in chapter 9. He says in verse 14, what then shall we say? Is there unrighteousness with Elohim? Let it not be. For he says to Moses, verse 15, I shall favor whom I favor. I shall have compassion whom I have compassion. That's a direct quote out of the Tanakh. We have that direct quote. And so that's the context of what he's talking about here. Remember, we're dealing with two groups of people arguing about why it's about me now. The Jewish community and the Gentile community coming into belief and submission and covenant, trying to say, it's about me now. He picked me because. And Paul's saying, no, he picked you by divine choice. You didn't earn it. You're not special in that same, in some sort of, like you did something to deserve this. Wow, that's different. Okay, so let's understand chapter 11 and verse 6. I've never explained this way before. I only understood this morning. Okay, this is what he gave me this morning. He says, remember, this is, look at now, follow it. He says, is Elohim rejecting his people? No. Then it says Elohim has not rejected them. He uses the example of Elijah that there's more people. And how did he have those people? Where does that remnant come from? Verse 5, they are according to divine choice, divine favor. And it had nothing to do with anything they'd done prior to that moment. Okay, now I'm going to resist running to Ephesians where we're going to make the same point real clearly because we're going to get there after we finish Romans, okay? So I'm going to resist that urge. But you'll see it there too. The exact same thing. The people in Ephesians are told, you guys were absolutely the dregs of the dregs, losers without Elohim, and by his divine favor, he chose you. Totally undeserving by anything you'd done up to that moment. By his love and divine favor. But it has nothing to do with works after that moment. See, people want to read into this that it's about grace, not works. And they're thinking about it going forward. Everything in verse 6 is about backwards. It's about how you got picked. Is that not clear? Now that we see it, is that not clear? I told you it was going to just open it up and be like, wow, it's so simple. All you had to know is that he's talking about how we got picked, how he chose what he chose, who he chose, when he chose them. It's just by his divine choice. And remember, Paul's making this argument earlier on that people are all about, who he picks and when he picks. He says, hey, Yahweh said, I get to choose who I want, when I want. It's my thing, and you have nothing to say about it. That point's already been made in chapter 9. So now we're here in 11. It's no different point. Nothing you did earned or deserved him picking you. He had his reasons. It was his choice, period. Now, what you do after is what you demonstrate to him, that how much you appreciate his believing that you could do this.